My name is Anna. I'm 29 years old and live in a modest apartment in the Fairmount section of Philadelphia. I work in financial planning, mostly advising mid income clients who want to retire without fear. It's the kind of job people mistake for dull until they realize I'm the person who tells them whether their future is even possible. I like the numbers. I like the control. I like knowing what I'll have next month, next year, next decade. That's not something I grew up with. It's a Thursday when the voicemail comes. The sun outside is low and soft, spilling gold across the hardwood floors. I mop every Sunday. My laptop is open, a spreadsheet neatly arranged in soft blues and grays. One column shows what I've saved for a solo trip to Colorado next spring. Another is labeled Condo Down Payment. My hand rests on my coffee mug still warm. The phone buzzes once. Then again, I glance at the screen. Mom, voicemail 1. I don't move right away. The name alone is enough to shift the atmosphere in the room like the temperature has dropped a few degrees. My thumb hovers over the play button. Eventually, I press it. Her voice fills the space too loud, too familiar. Anna, it's your mother. I didn't want to bother you, but I really need your help. Just for a while, nothing long term. The bills are piling up. Mason hasn't found work yet, and the furnace keeps going out. If you could just send $1,500 a month, that would hold us over until spring. I wouldn't ask if I had another choice. The message ends with a clipped breath like she'd said too much or not enough. I stare at the screen. My thumb moves to the edge where the delete icon waits, but I don't tap it. Not yet. The silence that follows is not empty, it's full. Full of every year I spent pretending I was imagining it, that maybe I was just being dramatic, overly sensitive, ungrateful. I close the laptop, the click loud in the quiet room. Outside the window, the city moves with its usual muted hum. A SEPTA bus groans around the corner. A dog barks from a neighboring stoop. Inside, I sit motionless on the couch phone, still in hand. It's not the money that stings. I could send it easily. I have an emergency fund. I've built my life like a fortress, every expense tracked, every contingency planned. It wouldn't ruin me. But it wouldn't be temporary, and I know that it never is. It's the voice that asks, the voice of the same woman who once told a neighbor Anna always fends for herself. She never needs anything. I don't remember the last time she asked how I was. The last time she came to visit me in this apartment, she walked in, looked around, and said, "It's nice, a little quiet, but nice." That was 3 years ago. She hasn't come back since. I swipe the screen and open my budget. The columns shine like armor protecting me from what I feel. I scroll to the bottom line. Discretionary, $1,500. I've marked it for condo savings. A quiet dream I've held since college, to live in a space with no shared walls, no echoes through vents, no one else's name on the mailbox. My phone buzzes again, another voicemail from her. I don't open it. Instead, I pull up an old folder, one I haven't opened in over a year. It's titled Transfers. Home, though I should have renamed it, The Invisible Tab. The list goes back 7 years. Gas bills, furnace repairs, Mason's medical deductible, a summer camp deposit I wasn't even told about until after it was paid. I scroll past them slowly, each entry like a pin pressed into my skin. $300, emergency oil tank refill $9.80, Mason's dental work $200, property tax shortfall $400, groceries. Just this once, she said. It adds up to $24,775. That's just the digital record. It doesn't include the groceries. I mailed the Amazon orders for household items, the bus tickets back home for weekends spent fixing leaks and babysitting. I lean back against the couch, my body suddenly heavy. The voicemail sits in my phone like a brick in water. She didn't say I miss you. She didn't say thank you for what you've done. She didn't say I'm sorry for how things used to be. She asked for more. My mind drifts uninvited to Paul, my stepfather, the only adult who ever noticed when I went quiet. He's been gone 2 years now, and I still find myself waiting for his voice. I remember the night he handed me a manila envelope just before college containing applications and a bank ledger. "I was going to fix the porch with this," he said. "But you're the only reason this house stood as long as it did." He was the only one who said goodbye when I left, the only one who called every Sunday that first year. After he passed, the calls stopped. from everyone. A part of me wanted to believe I could earn my way back into the family. If I sent enough money, if I showed up when needed, maybe they'd see me again. Maybe I'd become visible. I tapped the screen, opening my banking app. The recurring transfer to S. Callahan Family Fund is still active. Next payment, November 5th, $1, $500. I hover for a long moment. There's a photo on my bookshelf, me at 17, standing in the driveway with a duffel bag and a scholarship letter in my hand. No one else in the photo. My mother had gone back inside before it was taken, said she was tired. I click into the transfer settings. Recurring on amount Waller $500 start date, April 2019, end date none. I scroll to the bottom and hit edit. Then cancel. The screen asks, "Are you sure?" I tap yes. A confirmation window appears. Transfer successfully canceled. It's not a declaration. It's not a war. It's the first quiet act of protecting myself. My hand trembles slightly as I set the phone down. I rise, walk to the window, and pull the curtain back an inch. The city looks like it's holding its breath. Snow flurries drift between streetlights, gentle and slow. The apartment is warm. In the stillness, I feel the edges of something I hadn't noticed before. Space, not loneliness space. I don't press play on the second voicemail. I don't respond. Instead, I walk to the kitchen and put the kettle on. As the water warms, I pull out my notepad and cross out transfer to mom. Then I write something else underneath. Condo, fully mined spring 2025. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, I'm still. For the first time in years, no part of me feels borrowed. I don't need to answer her call. I already have. My earliest memories of love are butter-slicked and maple sweet. Back then, I was 6 years old, and Sunday mornings meant pancakes shaped like smiley faces with strawberries for cheeks and syrup dripping down the edges. My real father used to hum old jazz tunes as he flipped the griddle cakes like a magician performing just for me. He called me his little queen and kissed the top of my head like it was a ceremony. My mother smiled then too. She didn't look past me. The morning he collapsed, I remember the sound of the spatula hitting the floor first. Everything that followed is a blur except the silence. It crept in like a fog after the funeral, filling every room of the house until it smothered even the smell of those warm breakfasts. I was small, sitting cross-legged on the couch with my tattered teddy bear, while neighbors walked in with potluck casseroles and pitiful eyes. My mother wore black, but not for long. Within 3 months, she was attending grief counseling at the local church. By spring, she'd met Paul. Paul was kind in a quiet way. He was nothing like my father. No theatrics, no syrup songs, but he noticed things. He noticed me. He was the only one who did. He didn't move in right away, but I remember how his presence grew slowly, like moss climbing up a stone wall. One morning he showed up with bagels. Another time he helped fix my bookshelf. The one I was too short to reach, I didn't know what stepdad meant yet, but when he offered to take me to school while mom stayed home with a headache, I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. A year later, Mason arrived. The day the blue crib showed up, I asked if it was for a friend's baby shower. My mother laughed and said, "Sweetheart, Mason's your baby brother. He's going to need you." Need me? That phrase would repeat over the next 4 years like a script. Mason needs a quiet house. Mason needs my attention. Mason needs you to be patient. What I needed became irrelevant. Our house transformed diaper bags stacked near the couch, burp cloths draped over chairs, bottles lining the kitchen counter. The quiet that had followed my father's death was replaced by the shrill whine of a newborn and the frenzied devotion of a mother reborn into a different identity. She called him her miracle. I became the afterthought. At first, I tried to adjust. I reminded myself that babies cried and spit up and required more hands-on care. I even helped folded onesies, fetched bottles, held the pacifier, while Mom answered the door. I told myself things would go back to normal once he was older, that she'd look at me the way she used to, that she'd come back. But time stretched and the version of her I once knew dissolved. One morning, I woke up early before school, expecting to find her in the kitchen. The pancake mix still sat in the cabinet unopened. She was asleep on the couch, Mason curled on her chest, both of them tangled in blankets. I made my own toast and left quietly. That became the routine. When I made the honor roll in second grade, I brought home my certificate with glittered letters. I waited until dinner to show her beaming. She skimmed it with barely a nod, her eyes darting toward Mason, who was shrieking because his crayon broke. "You're smart, sweetheart," she murmured, already getting up to calm him. "Help me find the blue one, would you?" That certificate ended up stuffed behind the microwave. I watched her tape one of Mason's scribbles to the fridge the next day, green circles and shaky stick figures, and call it a masterpiece. I didn't ask again. Paul tried in his way. He never interfered directly with my mother, but he made small gestures. Every Friday, he let me pick a muffin from the bakery near my school. He stood at the edge of the karate mat clapping with both hands when I earned my first yellow belt. He fixed a loose drawer in my desk without being asked and told me adults forget things sometimes, but I see how hard you're trying. It meant more than he knew. Still, it wasn't enough to stop what was happening to me. Not entirely. There's a photo, there used to be, of me sitting on the floor in the hallway, my art project balanced on my knees. It was a model of the solar system made from yarn and glitter balls. I had stayed up late finishing it. When I showed it to Mom, she said, "That's nice, but don't you think your teacher would prefer a math project?" Mason spilled juice on it later that day. I cried and she snapped, "He's just a baby. He didn't know. You should have put it somewhere safe." After that, I didn't cry much. I just stopped showing things. By the time I turned 9, I had memorized the internal rhythms of our household. Mason woke up at 6. Mom made him oatmeal with blueberries cut in half. She'd sing to him while brushing his hair, a song I recognized but hadn't heard in years. I'd quietly fill my cereal bowl and sit at the table unacknowledged. I learned to tie my own hair. I used the reflection of the microwave because the bathroom was always occupied. If I was lucky, Paul would drop me off at school and we'd stop for a blueberry muffin, even if I didn't say a word the whole ride. Those muffins became a symbol for me not because of the sweetness, but because someone had remembered I existed. Sometimes Paul would glance at me across the breakfast table, a sad smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. "Don't let this house convince you you're small," he said once very quietly. I never forgot that line. But I did become small in a way, or at least I learned how to take up less space. I'd see other kids clinging to their moms after school, showing off finger paintings or spelling tests. I stopped bringing mine home. I stopped expecting her to clap. The only time she remembered my birthday that year was when Paul reminded her. She apologized, told me she'd been distracted with Mason's vaccination schedule. He had a cake shaped like a train for his 3rd birthday. Mine was a leftover pie from the grocery store. I didn't complain. I'd already trained myself not to. Still, the cracks formed, quiet ones. On weekends, I'd retreat to the back porch and draw on scrap paper. Sometimes I'd trace the outline of the blue crib and sketch myself sitting beside it, a ghost in my own family. I remember once asking her gently, "Do you think Mason will ever be okay without you doing everything for him?" She turned offended. "Why would you say that?" "I don't know, I just wondered." She shook her head and said, "You don't understand. Mason needs me." Then she left the room. That night, Paul came in while I was brushing my teeth and gently placed a small paper bag on the bathroom counter. Inside was a chocolate chip muffin. "No one gets to decide how much space you deserve," he said. Sometimes I wish I could have frozen that moment, held it still, preserved it like a pressed flower between pages. Because that was the last year he'd take me to school. Soon, Mason would need those rides. And I would become what I already felt like. Background. By the time I turned 11, I understood that my mother had already assigned roles in our family. Mason was the light, fragile, bright, always at the center. I was the shadow, solid, quiet, there only when needed. Middle school was when I stopped waiting to be noticed and started building something of my own. Every morning I woke up before the sun. Not because I was eager, but because I'd learned that in the early hours no one demanded anything from me. The house was still, Mason still asleep. My mother resting from the long night of tending to his needs. I could sit at the kitchen table with my textbooks open, sipping cold water and reading chapters ahead. It was the one place where effort gave me something: grades, recognition from teachers, an identity that felt like mine. At home, it changed nothing. That winter, I caught the flu. It started with a slow-burning fever and a sore throat, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be accused of exaggerating. I just wrapped myself in a sweatshirt and pushed through. It was Paul who noticed. He came home late from work and found me curled up on the couch, shivering, a school paper clutched in my hands. I'd fallen asleep in my uniform, still damp from walking home in the sleet. He touched my forehead and frowned. Without saying a word, he brought in a washcloth soaked in cold water, dabbed it gently along my hairline, then disappeared into the kitchen. I drifted in and out of sleep as the smell of soup reached me. I remember the clinking of a spoon, the soft creak of the floor as he sat next to me. He didn't ask why I hadn't told anyone. He just stayed. That night, he brought a blanket from the guest room and sat in the recliner nearby. Every hour, he came over to check my temperature. At some point, he pressed something cold to my lips. It was orange juice freshly squeezed, not from the jug Mason usually drank. The next morning, my mother came downstairs and glanced at me. I was still pale, bundled on the couch. "You probably didn't wear enough layers," she said, her voice flat. "You know it's cold this time of year." She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't notice the extra pillows, the bowl of soup half-eaten on the side table, or the damp washcloth Paul had carefully folded. After that, I stopped hoping she'd change. Instead, I turned my energy inward. If I couldn't be loved for being me, maybe I could be respected for what I could do. I began keeping a folder of every perfect score, every extra credit worksheet, every commendation note from teachers. I filed them meticulously in my closet behind the winter coats no one wore. I told myself that one day I'd show her the whole collection, that she'd look through the pages and finally say, "You did good, Anna." I imagined that scene often, but it never came. At Mason's school recital, he stood on stage and hummed through half the lyrics of a holiday song. My mother stood in the front row recording every offbeat note. Afterward, she handed him a bouquet of tulips and kissed his forehead like he'd won a Grammy. I clapped too. I didn't know why. When I got a perfect score on the regional science assessment, only one in my grade, I brought the certificate home and left it on the kitchen counter. It stayed there for 3 days. Then, someone spilled milk on it and it was tossed in the trash with the coffee grounds. Paul saw it briefly. He lifted the damp page and tilted his head. "This yours?" he asked. Was I sad? He didn't offer sympathy. He just nodded slowly, then handed me a clean manila folder. "For the next one," he said. It became our silent ritual. Every Friday, we'd stop by the same bakery, even after I outgrew the muffins. He never said much, but he always looked at me like I mattered. It wasn't love in the grand sense, it was smaller, quieter. A steady acknowledgement that I wasn't invisible to everyone. By 12, I had mastered the art of disappearing. I was never loud, never in the way, never needy. I handled my homework. Alone signed my own permission slips and kept my room so clean it was like I wasn't living there at all. I heard my mother say to a neighbor once, "Anna's so easy, doesn't ask for anything." Honestly, it's a relief. She didn't realize I heard her. I started sitting in the farthest corner of the living room during family movie nights, not because I liked it, but because I knew it meant no one would need to find space for me. I packed my own lunches, bought my own pens, learned to braid my hair tight and neat so she wouldn't have to brush it anymore. Mason, on the other hand, was chaos wrapped in affection. He was messy, loud, demanding, but he was adored for it. He didn't clean up his toys. He never said thank you. If he got a B on a spelling test, the house celebrated like it was a miracle. If he got in trouble at school, my mother blamed the teacher. When I came home with a report card of straight A's, she said, "Well, you've always been responsible." That was the compliment. A word she used like it excused everything else. One year, Mason's birthday party featured a clown, an inflatable castle, and a magician. There were blue and gold balloons tied to every surface. She spent a week planning it, made custom invitations, even baked the cake from scratch. My birthday that year came and went with a single candle stuck in a store-bought brownie. Paul remembered he handed me a small box. Inside was a sketch pad, blank pages unlined. I hadn't asked for one, but he must have seen me doodling in the margins of my homework. "Thought you might like a fresh start," he said. I nodded. I didn't know what to say, but I kept that sketch pad for years. At school, teachers loved me. I was the kind of student they wished every kid could be: disciplined, punctual, always prepared. I was given a seat on the student council by 8th grade, ran the science fair booth, helped organize the fundraiser. Everyone admired my work ethic. No one asked why I worked so hard. No one knew that I was trying to fill a gap that had no bottom. In the evenings, I'd sit at the dining table with my biology book open while my mother sat on the couch watching Mason show her something on his tablet. I could hear her laughter, her soft praise. "You're such a clever boy." I held my pencil tighter. "There's a memory I still carry. It's not loud, not dramatic. It's just me standing in the kitchen clutching my biology textbook while my mother asks me to clean the spilled juice Mason left under the table. But I'm doing homework," I said for once, pushing back. She looked up from the couch, annoyed. "You're older. Help your brother. Don't argue." So I bent down, wiped the floor, and said nothing else. That night, Paul came into my room while fixing the drawer on my desk. If I disappeared, I whispered to him, "Do you think she'd notice?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Your mom. She sees what she wants to see. But I see you, Anna." I didn't cry. I just turned back to my book. The next morning, I made my own toast and went to school with a fever. No one asked why I looked pale. No one noticed the cold sweat on my forehead. But I got an A on my test, and I stapled it to the wall in my room where only I could see it. Proof I existed, even if no one else acted like I did. The envelope came on a Thursday. Thin, white, official-looking, I had seen the return address so many times in my daydreams that it felt almost surreal to hold it in my hands. Temple University Office of Admissions, Philadelphia. I walked upstairs slowly, letter clutched to my chest like it might disappear. I didn't open it right away. I wanted to remember that moment, standing in my room, the late afternoon sun catching on the edge of my mirror, a biology notebook half open on my bed. I slid my finger along the flap and unfolded the page. "Dear Anna Callahan, congratulations." I sat on the floor and just stared at it. Not because I was shocked. I had worked hard for this meticulously, quietly for years, but because for the first time, something I wanted had finally said yes. Dinner that night was overcooked spaghetti and a long monologue from Mason about a YouTuber who'd been so unfairly banned. I waited until the dishes were cleared. Then I pulled the letter from my pocket and placed it on the table in front of my mother. She looked at it for a second, then back at me. I got in. I said Temple University Business Administration. Paul, sitting across from me, smiled faintly. "That's great, Anna." My mother's eyes didn't move from the letter. "And how exactly do you plan to pay for it?" I blinked. "I've applied for scholarships, grants. I've been saving from tutoring. And the FAFSA form said." She waved a hand. "Don't throw acronyms at me. Mason's going to need prep courses soon, and we're already behind on the oil bill." I opened my mouth, closed it, and then glanced at Paul. He didn't speak, but I saw something shift behind his eyes, the same way he looked when the roof leaked and he realized he'd have to fix it alone. I left the table quietly and went upstairs, the acceptance letter still in my hand. That night, I folded it carefully and placed it inside a copy of Mice and Men, a book we'd been assigned sophomore year. I had underlined the phrase, "I got you to look after me, and you got me to look after you," and wondered even then what it would be like to have someone say that to me and mean it. The next morning, Paul knocked gently on my door. He held a small, battered savings book in one hand. "Can I talk to you?" I nodded and moved my textbooks aside to make space on the bed. "I've been putting money aside," he said, "just a little. It was for the porch. You know the steps are starting to rot, but—" He opened the book and showed me the balance. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover the first semester if I got partial aid. Maybe more. "I know you'll make it stretch," he said. "You always do." I didn't cry. I just looked down at the weathered cover of the savings book and whispered, "Thank you." Paul placed it in my hands and stood. My mother found out later that day I was upstairs packing away old notebooks when I heard her voice downstairs, sharp raised, unfiltered in its anger. "You're giving her money for college. Are you out of your mind? Mason has SAT prep coming up, and what happens when she drops out? You think she's going to finish. You think she'll come back and fix the porch when it collapses." "She's never let this family down," Paul said calmly but firmly. "She's not this family," my mother snapped. "She's just some kid who lives here." I stopped breathing. There was a pause, then footsteps, then the slam of a door. I stayed upstairs, silent, staring at my open suitcase. Later that night, Paul came into my room. He didn't mention the argument, he just handed me a manila folder. Scholarship applications. Some deadlines are close. I printed the ones I thought matched your GPA. I took the folder from him and nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a bus ticket. There's a campus tour next week. I know it's not much, but it might help. I set the ticket on the nightstand and looked around my room. The same cracked dresser, the same scuffed floor. Everything felt smaller now, like the house had shrunk around me. That Sunday, I packed my things. Not everything, just what I'd need: a few outfits, my best pair of shoes, the folder of applications, my acceptance letter, and the savings book Paul had given me. My suitcase's handle had a tear on one side. I wrapped it in duct tape. I didn't say goodbye to Mason. He was in his room, yelling into his headset, fingers clicking on a game controller. The door was half closed, the room pulsing with blue LED lights. He didn't notice I was leaving. My mother stood in the kitchen. She didn't look up when I entered. I'm going. I said I leave in an hour. She turned to the page of a magazine. We'll see how long that lasts. I waited a moment, hoping naively for something, a flicker of softness, a crack in the wall. There was nothing. Paul met me at the front door. He didn't try to hug me. He just put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Whatever you do, don't come back small." I stepped out into the afternoon light. The air was cool, and the sun filtered through the bare branches of the trees lining our street. I wheeled the suitcase behind me, its small wheels rattling over the uneven pavement. No one waved, no one watched. When the bus pulled up, I handed the driver my ticket and found a seat by the window. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back one last time. The house stood quiet, still. The porch steps were still cracked. The curtains in the living room hung crooked. But I didn't feel sad. I felt weightless. I reached into my bag and pulled out the acceptance letter, smoothing the crease across the middle. My name was there, printed in bold, undeniable ink. Anna Callahan, welcome to Temple. The bus hummed beneath me as the city opened up in the distance, the skyline rising like a promise. One application, one suitcase, one goodbye. And not a single reason to look back. I didn't expect college to be easy, but I hadn't prepared for how lonely it would feel to build a life with no safety net. My dorm room was the size of a storage closet, and most nights I fell asleep with the sound of footsteps above me and sirens echoing in the distance. I shared a hallway with girls who ordered takeout every night, while I scraped by on granola bars and dollar store ramen. But even with the hunger and the exhaustion, I felt something new blooming in my chest. Freedom. No one at Temple knew my mother. No one asked about Mason. I didn't have to explain why I triple-checked price tags or picked up weekend shifts at the library to afford a used economics textbook. Here I was, just Anna. The girl who raised her hand in class, asked too many questions, and carried a second-hand laptop like it was gold. Still, I kept my phone on. The first call came a few weeks into my second semester. My mother's voice was tight, brittle. Anna, the heating bill came early. It's higher than usual this year. Paul tried, but the tank's nearly empty. It's freezing in the house. I was standing outside the dining hall when I heard it. My hands were already cold, the phone slick with mist from the rain. I didn't think I just opened the banking app, transferred $800, and texted the confirmation. She responded with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. That became the pattern. Every few months, I'd get a message, the roof leaking, the water heater, failing Mason's tuition deposit that had somehow disappeared. There was always a reason, and it was always urgent. At first, I rationalized it. I'd lived in that house. I didn't want Paul freezing in the winters or Mason dropping out, though I wasn't sure what he was studying anymore. Still, I sent what I could, $500 here, $900 there. My savings thinned, but I called it responsibility. It didn't feel like love. Mason stopped calling me Anna and started calling me the bank. At first it was a joke, then it became a habit. On Thanksgiving, when I came home for a long weekend, he was sprawled across the couch in a hoodie that probably cost more than my week's groceries. "Bank's home," he said, without looking up from his phone. I carried in 2 bags of groceries, the receipt still tucked in my coat pocket. Nobody else had thought to stock the fridge. I cooked, I cleaned, I kept my voice down so Mason could game without interruption. When I left on Sunday, no one walked me to the door. Paul stood near the stairwell and said, "Drive safe." My mother called after I got back, not to thank me but to ask if I'd remembered to leave the spare toilet paper in the hall closet. By my senior year, Paul had grown quieter. His hair was thinning, his voice raspier. He still smiled when we spoke, but it didn't reach his eyes. One night he called me rare. For him, I was closing the library and almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "I just needed to hear your voice," he said. "Everything okay?" I asked. A pause, then a slow exhale. "Your mom's been dipping into the savings again. I didn't realize until the car payment bounced. Mason said he needed a new monitor. Said it was for school, but I've never seen him study." I leaned against the brick wall behind the library, the cold pressing through my coat. "I'm sorry, Paul," I said. He let out a weak laugh. "You don't have anything to be sorry for." Another pause. "Some days I think if you hadn't been here, none of us would have made it. I know it's not fair. I just don't know how to stop it." I closed my eyes. I didn't say what I wanted to, that I felt like I was paying for their comfort with the coins scraped from my own piece. That I didn't know what I was still trying to earn from a family that had already decided I was background noise. Instead, I said, "Do you need help with the car?" He hesitated, then said, "Not this time." But I sent $400 the next morning anyway. I graduated with honors. My mother didn't come to the ceremony. Mason said he was too swamped to drive. Paul sent a card in the mail, folded neatly, no money inside, just his careful handwriting. "I hope you're proud of yourself. I always have been." I hung it on the wall above my first apartment's desk. The job wasn't glamorous junior financial consultant at a mid-size firm, but I was good at it. I tracked every dollar. I built my own spreadsheets detailed and color-coded, rent, utilities, food savings, and one column labeled family. I didn't like how it looked on the page, so I changed it to support. Still, it drained me. The calls didn't stop after graduation. If anything, they increased. Mason dropped out of school, citing mental health. My mother said he was under too much pressure. He stayed home, spent hours in front of his monitor, ordered food delivery 5 nights a week. I knew this, not because he told me, but because I paid the credit card that listed the transactions. I asked once why he didn't work part-time. My mother replied, "He's fragile, Anna. You've always been strong." As if strength justified being overlooked. As if survival meant I owed them the air in my lungs. Paul called less frequently. His health was slipping. He mentioned chest pain once casually, like it was just heartburn. I begged him to see a doctor. He said he couldn't afford the deductible. So I paid it. That was the last time we spoke. The next call came from my aunt. "Anna, I don't want to scare you, but Paul's in the hospital. It's serious. You should come." I caught the first train out of the city. He was already gone. Heart failure, sudden quiet, just like him. At the funeral, my mother wept for the man who'd held our family together. Mason stood in the back, scrolling on his phone. I stood beside the casket and thought about the times Paul sat in a freezing car to drive me to school when he spent his weekends fixing broken faucets and repairing windows no one else noticed. He never asked for thanks, just gave. The only one who never treated me like a burden. Afterward, I didn't return to the house. I took the train home in silence. The moment I stepped into my apartment, I dropped the keys on the counter, opened my laptop, and pulled up my financial logs. There it was. Family, year to date, $9,200, total to date, $26,850. Not a loan, not a gift, just gone. A week later, my mother called. "Things are rough right now. Paul used to handle so much. I'm overwhelmed. Mason still hasn't found work, and the bills." Her voice cracked, practiced, and raw. "Can you help? Just $1,500 a month until we catch our breath." I stared at the phone. $1,500. On top of the $26,000. On top of the childhood that taught me I didn't need help only to give it. I didn't say no. But I didn't say yes either. I hung up, and this time I didn't feel guilt. Just quiet. And a question I had been too afraid to ask before. What would happen if I let them fall? I hadn't planned to go. I'd told myself for weeks that I wouldn't. but that Saturday I found myself walking up the steps of the house I once called home, holding a grocery bag with 2 loaves of artisan bread, a jar of fig preserves, and a box of the same cookies my mother used to love. It was absurd how old habits clung to the body long after the heart had let go. The porch had been repainted. The peeling wood was now a sleek gray clean lines and a new doormat that said, "Welcome home." I almost laughed. I rang the doorbell. Footsteps quick and careless. Then the door swung open. A girl I didn't recognize stood there chewing gum and holding her phone in one hand. Her hair was platinum blonde with purple streaks curled into perfect waves. Her acrylic nails clicked against the doorframe as she gave me a slow once-over. "Can I help you?" she asked, not unkind, but not curious either. "I'm Anna. I used to live here," I said, suddenly unsure of how to introduce myself. Her eyebrows rose. "Oh, you're Mason's sister." I nodded. She smiled and stepped back. "Mason's mom told me about you." Mason's mom. Not my mom. Not our mom. Just Mason's. I stepped inside. The living room was unrecognizable. The faded armchair Paul had used every night was gone. So was the old couch, replaced with a leather sectional in a deep, unnatural black. A massive television sat mounted above a fake fireplace glowing blue at the edges. The bag in my hand felt heavier. "You brought food?" Kayla asked, taking the bag without waiting for a reply. She rifled through it and pulled out the cookies first. "Oh, these are the expensive ones, nice." She tore open the box, plucked one out, and took a bite. I looked around for my mother. "She's in the kitchen," Kayla said, already halfway to the couch. "Mason's gaming. He doesn't like to be interrupted." I crossed the room and walked down the hall, my hand trailing lightly against the wall, searching for something familiar. The pictures were different. Mason at prom. Mason on a jet ski. Mason in a cap and gown I didn't know he'd earned. I found my mother rinsing dishes. She turned startled, then forced a smile. "Anna, you didn't say you were coming." "I didn't know I was," I said. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked over, eyeing the bag Kayla had already pilfered. "What did you bring?" "Groceries, a few things I thought you'd like." She nodded non-committal. That was thoughtful. The silence stretched. I looked at her. Really looked. She'd aged her skin thinner. Eyes tired, but there was still that tightness around her mouth, the kind that had always appeared when she was about to tell me something I didn't want to hear. I glanced around. "Where's Paul's chair?" She looked past me out the window. "We got rid of it. It didn't match the new furniture Mason and Kayla helped redecorate. It's nice, don't you think?" My mouth went dry. "You used the money I sent." Her expression didn't change. "I used it to keep the house running." "For them," I said. "Mason needed help." "I thought I was helping you?" She let out a short, humorless laugh. "You always were so literal." I didn't respond. I couldn't. At that moment, Kayla walked in, licking crumbs off her fingers. "Hey," she said to my mother. "Where's the will I wanted to show Mason that clause you added?" The room stilled. I turned. "What will?" My mother sighed almost dramatically and walked to the drawer by the fridge. She pulled out a folder cream-colored thick and handed it to me like she was offering a menu. "I updated everything last year after Paul passed." I opened it slowly. The first page bore her name. The second listed the assets, the house, the car, the savings account, all of it under one beneficiary. Mason Callahan. My name wasn't there. Not even as an alternate, not even in small print. I looked up. She didn't flinch. "Mason's the one who needs stability." She said, her voice low, as if I was the one causing a scene. "You've got your job, your apartment, your life. You don't need anything." I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman who had once braided my hair with the one standing in front of me, now hands folded neatly over the life she'd given to someone else. "You asked me for help," I said slowly. "Month after month. You let me carry this place, pay for the furnace, the food, the repairs." "I never forced you," she said. "No," I whispered. "You just knew I would." She turned away. "You've always been strong, Anna Mason. Mason isn't." "That's not love," I said, my voice suddenly sharp. "That's an excuse." Kayla shifted uncomfortably, but no one said anything. I handed the folder back, careful not to crumple the edges. Does Mason even know I asked? He knows he's the priority, she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. A noise came from the hallway, loud, brash, unmistakably Mason's voice through a headset. I didn't ask to see him. I walked back to the living room. The couch smelled like artificial leather and men's cologne. The cookies were already half gone. My mother followed behind me, still holding the folder. I'm sorry if this hurts you, she said flatly. No, you're not, I replied. She stood by the door as I slipped on my coat. You can still come by, you know, she added almost as an afterthought. You're still family. I looked at her, then really looked and said the only honest thing I could manage. No, I was useful. That's not the same. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Outside, the wind cut across the porch, lifting the edge of the new doormat. I paused at the end of the walkway, turned once, and looked back. The house looked polished, upgraded, like it belonged to someone else. Maybe it always had. I walked away, hands in my coat pockets, the cold biting at my cheeks. Behind me, the home I had helped sustain held no space for me, not in its living room, not in its memory, not even in its paperwork. The cookies I had brought were gone. The sofa Paul once napped on had been discarded. The name on the will was not mine, and I no longer needed it to be. The cancellation only took a few seconds. 1 password, 2 clicks, confirm. My banking app refreshed itself the scheduled transfer to S. Callahan, disappearing from my transaction list like it had never existed. The screen displayed a message in clean green font, recurring transfer successfully canceled. That was it. No dramatic music, no thunder in the distance, just silence, and for the first time it didn't feel heavy. I sat there on the edge of my bed, laptop still open, a slow exhale unraveling from my chest. I had made the decision 2 days earlier after walking out of that house, after seeing my name missing from every wall, every document, every thought that passed through my mother's mind. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even surprised. I was finished. It didn't take long for the messages to start. The first came that evening, a voicemail from my mother. Anna, I think something's wrong with the account. The payment didn't come through. Could you check on your end? The voice was polite, hopeful. It wasn't real. The next morning she texted, Still nothing. This month's heating bill is past due. Can you resend it manually? I didn't respond. By the afternoon, she had dropped the tone entirely. If you stopped the payment, that's cruel. I hope you understand what you're doing to this family. I sat at the kitchen table, the mug in my hands still warm. Outside, the city moved quietly. Nothing in me reached for the phone. Later that night, Mason messaged, You seriously pulled the plug. Real mature. Mom's crying. You're proud of yourself. I deleted the message without reading it twice. Then came Kayla. She used Instagram. Can't believe you're that kind of person. Tommy's having a breakdown. Thought you were better than this. I didn't block them immediately. I read everything one by one, not because I wanted to hurt myself, but because I needed to face the pattern. The moment I stopped pouring into them, they collapsed, not from poverty, but from entitlement, from the withdrawal of something they believed they were owed. Me. I opened my settings one by one. I blocked them. Messages, numbers, social media accounts. It felt like standing in a quiet room and slowly closing all the windows against a howling wind. For the first time in years, I wasn't reachable. I wasn't responsible. The next day, I walked to the grocery store around the corner. I wandered through the aisles, not in a rush, not checking my balance before picking up items. I let myself buy the wine I always passed by. I reached for the ice cream I hadn't bought since college, French vanilla with ribbons of sea salt caramel, and tucked it gently into my basket. At the register, the receipt printed out slowly. When I took it in my hands, I looked at the name on top. Anna Callahan. No joint account, no family card, just mine. I walked home under the late afternoon sky, golden light stretching across the sidewalk. It was a small thing, that receipt, but it felt like proof of something. Ownership, freedom. A quiet kind of self. Back home, I unpacked the groceries, poured a glass of wine, and opened my laptop. The art class had been sitting in my bookmarks for months. Saturday Sketching for Adults, a small group that met in a studio above a used bookstore. Every time I'd hovered over it before I'd clicked away, too expensive, too indulgent, too self-centered. Now I clicked register. The confirmation email arrived within seconds. Welcome, Anna. It startled me how unfamiliar it felt to spend money on something that wasn't necessary, but that was the point. I was no longer a provider. I was a person. I spent that weekend in a quiet rhythm. I cleaned the apartment not because anyone was coming, but because I liked the feeling of bare counters and sunlit floors. I changed the sheets, lit a candle I'd been saving for months, and watched a documentary without checking my phone once it never buzzed. The silence had changed. It wasn't the absence of chaos anymore. It was the presence of peace. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail from my bank, confirmation that the recurring payments had been terminated. Enclosed was a balance sheet of all previous transfers. I read it slowly. Our $500 per month for 22 months. $33,000? Gone. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I simply folded the letter and slipped it into a file labeled Past. I didn't need to keep it visible. The final message came a week after the cutoff, a new number. No name. If you think cutting us off makes you better, it doesn't. You're just bitter. You'll regret this. I stared at the text, then deleted it without hesitation. Regret. I had eaten ice cream last night without guilt. I had registered for a class I'd once thought belonged to someone wealthier, freer, more deserving than me. I had stood in front of a mirror that morning, hair still damp from the shower, no makeup on, and smiled not because I was happy but because I finally felt clean. There was nothing to regret. That Saturday, I arrived at the art class 10 minutes early. The room was painted a pale yellow, windows wide open to the spring breeze. A long table sat in the middle, covered in paper pencils, soft pastels. The instructor greeted me warmly. You must be Anna. I nodded. She handed me a clipboard and gestured to a seat near the window. We're starting with still life. Don't worry if you haven't drawn in a while. I smiled, slid into the chair, and let my fingers trace the curve of the pencil. It had been years, but the motion came back slowly, like muscle memory built in childhood. The afternoons I used to sit on the porch sketching flowers while Mason napped and Mom forgot where I was. Now no one could forget me because I remembered myself. Later that night, I walked home, the sketch rolled under my arm. It wasn't anything remarkable, just a vase, a pear, a shadow stretching across the table, but it was mine. In the quiet of my apartment, I poured another glass of wine, opened the window, and watched the city below. Lights flickered on in rows. Someone was playing jazz in the apartment above me. I let the sound settle. No one needed me. No one was calling. And I wasn't alone. I was just free. That night, I placed the drawing on my fridge, not because it was perfect, but because I made it. No one else needed to see it. I was enough. It was a Sunday afternoon in early spring, the kind of day when the light stretches long across the pavement and everything feels suspended for a moment. I was driving through a part of the city I hadn't been to in years, cutting across Broad to avoid traffic near the museum. I wasn't planning on stopping. I was on my way to a friend's birthday, a quiet rooftop dinner she'd planned weeks ago. The playlist was already set, and I had a bottle of wine in the passenger seat. But the light at 5th and Chestnut turned red, and I slowed to a stop. Across the intersection in front of a small convenience store, I saw them. My mother was leaning against a cart, arms crossed, her hair tied in the same loose knot she always wore when she was shopping. Kayla stood beside her, talking quickly with animated hands, a glossy phone clutched in one palm, and just behind them, stepping out of the driver's side of a rust-streaked sedan, was Mason. Headphones around his neck, hoodie unzipped. His mouth was moving, either shouting or laughing. I couldn't tell. None of them saw me. I stayed still, hands resting lightly on the wheel, breath caught somewhere between memory and distance. They looked the same, not older, not wiser, just louder, like a life that had never paused to listen to itself. My mother's face was stern, distracted. Kayla rolled her eyes dramatically at something Mason said. He threw his hands in the air in response. The cart swayed slightly. For one brief second, I imagined rolling down the window, calling out, saying something sharp or measured or devastating. But then I looked into the rearview mirror. My own eyes looked back, calm, unbothered, a version of myself I had grown into, not inherited. The light turned green. I touched the gas, turned the wheel, and drove on. No one followed. No one called after me. That was the difference now. They didn't even know what they'd lost. By the time I reached my neighborhood, the sky had dipped into lavender. I parked, took the wine in one hand and the small gift bag in the other, and walked toward the building with a steady step. But I didn't go to the party. Not yet. Instead, I climbed the 3 flights to my apartment and let myself in. The hallway was quiet. The door clicked shut behind me, and I placed the bag on the kitchen counter. The place smelled like lemon and laundry sheets, a scent I'd come to associate with my own space. A soft hum came from the small radiator by the window. Light filtered in through ivory curtains, casting pale squares on the hardwood floor. I shrugged off my coat, poured hot water over a tea bag, and let the steam rise slowly. The envelope from my last lease renewal sat on the table. I opened it again, even though I already knew what it said. Tenant Anna Callahan, Unit 3C, lease term, 12 months, utilities in name confirmed. It was just paper, but it was mine. I took the mug and carried it to my bedroom, the same quiet room where I'd woken up every day for 2 years without dread. No creaking stairs, no shouting through walls, just my breath, the soft rustle of sheets, and the click of the heat turning on. Across from my bed hung a mirror, wide wood-framed, nothing fancy, but it reflected everything I needed. A neatly made bed, a worn bookshelf, a painting from my art class leaning slightly to one side. The walls were not expensive, the furniture wasn't curated, but the stillness inside them felt earned. I sipped the tea and watched myself in the glass. Not to admire, to recognize. There had been a time when I would have chosen the other direction, would have parked the car, crossed the street, walked back into their orbit like a satellite, still hoping to be caught. That time had passed. I used to think I was walking away from them. Now I understood I was walking toward myself. Somewhere behind me they would repeat the same stories, make the same excuses. Mason would pace behind his mother's apron strings. Kayla would find new ways to twist my name into a warning. Let them. The silence in this room was not hollow. It was full of every no I had said, every step I had taken, every time I'd closed the door and chosen stillness over noise. The tea warmed my hands. Outside, the street lamp flickered on. And inside that mirror, my reflection did not ask to be seen. It was already known. I didn't need to prove anything, not to them, not anymore. I set the mug down and pulled my coat back on. There was a gathering waiting, not a grand celebration, but a table of friends who had never asked me to earn a seat. Before I left, I glanced at the mirror one last time. The woman looking back wasn't bitter. She wasn't broken. She was whole. And that, I realized, was what they'd never given me. A name that meant belonging. A place that wasn't borrowed. A mirror that didn't lie. Now I had all 3, and none of them required going back. Some stories are not about dramatic confrontations or loud victories. They are about the quiet strength it takes to walk away, not because you hate what's behind you, but because you finally see your own worth. Anna's journey was not one of revenge, but of release. She gave, waited, and hoped until she understood that being unseen does not mean being unworthy. In choosing peace over obligation, she reclaimed more than just money or time. She reclaimed herself. For anyone who has ever been the silent one, the reliable one, the one left out of the story they helped hold together, know this: walking away is not weakness. Sometimes it is the beginning of everything. If this story moved, you share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more powerful journeys of healing, self-respect, and quiet resilience. Your voice matters here.